Manwe, King of the Valar. Now, if you don't know what and who the Valar are, I explain that a bit more in my Varda video, so you can watch that video if you need more context. Anyways, Manwe is basically the head over all the other Valar, and being called the Lord of the Breath of Arda, his domain is the air. Of course, the most clear way for me to illustrate his association with wind is to have his hair and clothing blown about by it. So, that is what I do. Now to welcome all you lovely people to Laurel and Artistry, where I do art and talk about the things I enjoy. I gave Varda black hair and I give her husband Manwe white hair. I know it looks grey right now, just be patient. I tend to associate wind and air with grayish blues and purples, so that's what I'll mostly be working with here. Cool colors like I gave Varda, but with a much paler palette. I add a bunch of silver beads to his crown, as well as his bracers. I just want to add a lot of flowy things to give the drawing movement. Adjust the colors to add a bit more brightness, and then add in the blue sky. Now to start on some shading of all the little metal bits. Airbrushing it to look kind of shiny and, well, metallic. I kind of have a lighter silver and a darker one, but they're not actually that different. Time to shade the rest of him. He's in light gray-blue robes with a darker blue sash. And he's got glowing blue eyes. Now I add white highlights to his hair. I kind of want it to look wispy, like a cloud or a mist. Which is why I made his hair a bit translucent. Then I add some solid highlights to the rest of Manwe, so that it's not just his hair that looks like that. Manwe is the sibling of Melkor, who, of course, rebelled and is now called Morgoth, who was the greatest of the Valar before rebelling, basically out of a desire to create from his own will rather than in accordance with Iluvatar. No, don't make a pun about him being Morgoth now that he's embraced the darkness or something. Enough about Morgoth now, let's focus on adding detail to Manwe's face, giving his lips more shape and shading, and adding more definition around his eyes, shading his cheekbone and his ear, and of course give him an eyebrow. Give him a bit of a blue glow around his eye because I really want to emphasize the strength of his watchful sight, which could, from atop his mountain, see farther than all other eyes. I include some wispy designs engraved on his crown, and put slightly more shine on the silver beads. I also add engraving to the things in his hair, and now to give his crown some gems. I was gonna make them a more sapphire blue, but I thought a lighter blue would blend with the color palette a bit better. And I give some engraving and gems to his scepter as well. I draw in some individual strands of hair, and then make his eyes shine even more. Next, I add a swirling pattern onto his robe. Manwe, being the High King of Arda, is therefore more prominent in Tolkien's tales than many of the other Valar. But he still gets involved in any significant way very seldom. Now I add some bright blue trim, which I give a bit of a shimmer, as well as adding some white jewels into the swirls on his robe. The birds of the air are also his servants, particularly specific great eagles who would not have made for a realistic way to fly to Mordor and destroy the One Ring. Sorry, I may be getting a tad sidetracked there. Time to embroider his waistband. I also draw some designs on his bracers. Kinda Art Nouveau-ish, as is common for my art. try to make it look a bit engraved. Then add in a number of gems. Also put some on his ring. Now include still more swirls along the length of his staff, after which I put some swirling air around his scepter. Of course, air isn't visible, so I guess it's more like clouds. Lower the opacity on that, and then add in some white lines for both movement and some wispiness. Airbrush that a bit to help the solid lines blend a little. And then put some misty clouds behind him, trying not to overdo the details so that Manwe still stands out enough. And then finally, I draw an eagle perched on his arm. Of course, in the same grayish tones I used for the rest of the piece. Still think he's a smidge too dark, so I lighten him up. Draw a shadow under his feet, and then lighten him up still more. And there we go. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. I'd love it if you'd let me know if you'd like to see more Valar drawings done in this style. In the meantime, remember, eat your carrots so you can have eyesight like Manwe. Ciao!